frustrated with the whole way that our spiritual divorce through the church went down.
Really?
He's so mad about that he didn't get a say and he didn't get.
What would he have said?
I invited him. I talked to him about it, and he's like, "Well, let me give it some thought." And nothing. And then he was mad that he didn't get to talk about it.
Because it looks bad for him.
Meri told me about it. I didn't know what to say. I uninvolved myself. If I'd have been there and given them the reasons we broke up.
Changed the last, 30 years?
Maybe I have to. I don't want to talk to lawyers about it. It's like, I don't know what to do. I'm not interested in doing anything.
The wrath that we're going to get.
But Meri, he says so much stuff about us publicly. What else is he going to say?
And that's the same thing Jen says. She says, Meri, he brought it on himself. You warned him. You told him in the email, hey, let's do this or I'm going to have to get some lawyers involved.
Yeah.
And
You won't believe the tea we're spilling today. From secret breakups to shocking lies, this is Unreal Tea. Hit subscribe before the drama starts. Welcome, everyone. The tapes they never wanted you to hear for 18 seasons, Kody Brown told his story his way. He spoke of faith, unity, and the fragile balance of a plural lifestyle. But what if the real story was never the one we saw on TV? What if, hidden in hours of unaired footage, are the words that could destroy everything? Tonight, we investigate a theory so incendiary, so painstakingly constructed from rumor, insider sources, and behavior patterns that it may redefine the Brown family history for all time. Were Kody's own admissions made when he believed no one was listening the very catalyst for the destruction of his family, his wealth, and his carefully built persona? Hit like now if you believe the truth deserves to be uncovered. Subscribe and ring that bell, because what follows is a deep dive into the evidence the world was never meant to see. For nearly 2 decades, sister wives presented the Browns as pioneers of plural marriage, an unconventional family battling prejudice, financial strain, and personal sacrifice, all in the name of love and faith. But behind the scenes, the cracks were always there, faint at first, then widening with every season. Christine's growing independence, Janelle's quiet discontent, Meri's lingering loneliness, signs that the family's unity was built not on unshakable faith, but on the fragile scaffolding of reality TV storytelling. Kody, the patriarch, was the narrator of this illusion. Each confessional, each solo, each dramatic confrontation was a chance to reaffirm the image of a man shouldering the burden of 4 marriages and 18 children. But beneath his measured words, was there something darker, something unspoken, that foreshadowed a future showdown no one anticipated? And then there was the land, the notorious Coyote Pass. Promised as the family's Garden of Eden, it became the emblem of their shared dream. But might it also be the location of their ultimate betrayal? The facts point to the collapse not beginning with shattered hearts, it began with paperwork. The fantasy of cohesion began to fracture long before the cameras ceased filming. What audiences observed in the form of minor differences of opinion, snarky comments, heated family confrontations, tearful farewells, might have been portents of far greater, far darker, and much more insurmountable things than anyone knew. Behind closed doors, family dynamics changed. Christine, the bright heart of the family, started questioning not just her position in Kody's life, but the basis of the family's faith system. Janelle, practical, down-to-earth, and fiercely independent, began noticing the cracks in Coyote Pass's dream, questioning whether shared ownership was fantasy rather than fact. Meri, perpetually trapped between hope and despair, remained in emotional suspended animation. Sources indicate her reconciliation efforts were derailed by rumors of secret financial arrangements being made elsewhere, arrangements that might have left her with much less than had been anticipated. And then, there was Robyn. Gossip circulated that Robyn had surreptitiously acquired influence over family funds, legal property deeds, and even Kody's loyalty. True or not, the impression alone sowed seeds of suspicion among the other wives. Was this the reason why discussions once centered on union had turned into heated debates on property rights, inheritance, and evacuation plans? The tension was so acute that, in accordance with some speculations, Kody might have expressed much more than he ever should have during times of rage, times recorded on production tapes which are never made public. Words that, if uttered in a courtroom, could ruin his reputation and his dynasty. But the question is, what was on those tapes? And who had the authority to employ them? The air within the courthouse was thick, not with the summer heat, but with the weight of secrets and suspense. The Browns had endured cameras, criticism, and numerous rumors before, but not this. Nothing that would, in one fell swoop, ruin their meticulously built reputation. By rumors of those nearest to production, not everything shot for Sister Wives aired. Hours and hours of uncut confessionals, off-camera brawls, and unedited back-and-forths remained locked away, archived and untouched. But suppose entombed in that vault was a tape that no one was ever meant to hear, a tape that could rip everything asunder? The rumored tape held Kody's weakest moments, not the gentle patriarch of television interviews, but a man stressed, venting realities he had kept concealed for decades. Money mismanagement, home conflicts, admissions of favoritism that extended beyond emotional bias and right into contractual betrayal. Legal analysts speculate that, if such a video exists, it would be sufficient to initiate arbitration, or worse, court action regarding property rights, spousal contracts, and even the legality of previous financial choices. And the wives, Christine, Janelle, and Meri, perhaps they weren't quiet spectators. The drama unfolds, Kody and Robyn, on one side of a shiny oak table, attorneys negotiating in hushed tones. Across from them, the other wives, formerly tied by family and faith, now joined by one cause alone, to make certain the truth was told. But would the court permit the tapes to be played? Would the judge, severe, unyielding, adjudicate that the recordings constitute evidence, or entomb them forever beneath legal privilege? And if they were played, would they signal the start of Kody's reckoning? Or the demise of the Brown family as we know it? The air was charged with electricity, an almost cinematic silence that hung over the room, as if every individual in attendance knew that something enormous was on the verge of being unveiled. Rumors of the tapes had been floating for months, but now the speculation implied that there were more than a single set of recordings available. There were documents, archived, copied, and supposedly leaked from far inside production, comprising dialogues that had never gone public. Supposedly, the content was incriminating. Talks of property deals that didn't coincide with what was presented to the public. A hot dispute regarding finances, funds supposed to be pooled for Coyote Pass, but possibly funneled elsewhere. And then, most astonishing of all, Kody's own voice, supposedly admitting that some marriages had become business arrangements years before they broke up publicly. Legal analysts speculate that this type of evidence would be incendiary in arbitration. If genuine, it could challenge claims of contractual misrepresentation, financial impropriety, and even breach of trust, while blasting apart the meticulously constructed image of one holy, harmonious family. But beyond the legal ramifications, the emotional weight was staggering. Imagine the faces of Christine, Janelle, and Meri, watching, listening, reliving years of promises that now sounded hollow under the harsh light of alleged truth. And yet, the tapes, if they exist, have never been played publicly. Not in court. Not in a hearing. Not even in leaked audio online. Which means there's one question lingering on the horizon like a storm. Who possesses the smoking guns, and what's keeping them from firing? The storm had broken. Whether the supposed tapes were ever actually heard in a courtroom or not, their shadow cast itself large, rearranging the family dynamics in ways no one could have imagined. Christine, who had already set out on her own course, seemed to stride with increased confidence, as if she had been justified, at least in spirit, by what she knew was concealed all along. Janelle, being the pragmatist, started thinking of Coyote Pass less as a fantasy, but rather as collateral, something to be split, sold, or left behind depending on how things turned out. Meri had reached an impasse. Even as she had suffered heartbreak and loneliness, rumors indicated that now she had a subtle strength. Knowledge, records, and leverage. And maybe a willingness to employ it if forced too far. Kody and Robyn, those pillars of power, were said to be shaken, not so much by the wives' increasing autonomy, but by uncertainty about what might come next. Were there more recordings out there? Could previous deals be revoked? Would their financial empire withstand a complete public accounting? For Brown fans, the formerly tawny reputation of the Brown clan had evolved into something much more fascinating, a saga of devotion, treachery, and survival, unfolding not in a scripted television show, but in rumors, speculation, and court documents few will ever read. Yet as the dust finally cleared, it was certain the saga was anything but concluded. The dream of Coyote Pass, the land that had once represented hope, was now a quiet witness to the disintegration of the family. A desolate strip of land where people would wait to see who would own it, or who would simply turn away forever. The air thickened as loyalty and betrayal stood on the precipice of breaking. Every wife was poised on the threshold of a personal reckoning to determine not just whether or not to remain silent or talk, but whether or not to face up to the possibility that all that they had thought about their family had been founded on shaky footing. For Kody, the reckoning was existential, not just emotional. The patriarchal grip he had once held now looked shattered, frittering away with each mumbled thread of proof, each clandestine meeting, each letter from an attorney. And hanging over it all was the perpetual question, what would remain, his family, his reputation, or neither? Rumors circulated about someone outside the central family who may be privy to more than they ought to know, someone who had seen the unvarnished madness behind the cameras. A suspected insider, perhaps an old team member or friend, reportedly witnessed critical scenes of rage, admission, and confrontation. If he came forward, he would be the most volatile witness of all, not constrained by loyalty, but by what he had seen, what he had heard, and what he would be willing to say. But who was he? And what did he want in exchange for silence? Under the cracks of emotion, yet another tale was unfolding in silence, one based not on love, but on money. Rumors of how the Brown family's profit had been split surfaced. Speculation went that funds intended for joint investments, particularly Coyote Pass, might have been diverted unwittingly or not. And if financial records were to appear, revealing differences between promise and performance, it might set off not only litigation, but even public outrage. Was there a ledger, a bank record, or an unfilled contract in a safe, or worse, already with an eager claimant? The fractures in the family grew deeper as feelings finally broke out of control. Arguments previously whispered behind closed doors were now speculated to flood legal strategy meetings, with the sound of raised voices, accusations, and years of harbored resentments pouring out. Kody, previously the self-assured matriarch of the household, was described as battling to keep his cool. The burden of possible legal jeopardy, financial instability, and broken relationships had him on the brink of breakdown. While the wives, no longer bound by his control, were starting to behave as anything other than co-stars, but as enemies with an agenda, there was another theory predicting that Christine, Janelle, and Meri had discreetly agreed a deal, a one based not on friendship, but on survival. Each of them brought her own grievances, evidence, and bargaining chips. But together, they were something much more dangerous, a coalition that could take on Kody and Robyn in a way the audience had never experienced. But coalitions like this don't come cheap. Could three women who had once shared a life in the same house really trust each other now that the battle had escalated to financial and legal war? Or would someone switch sides before the truth could be known? Whispers of lawsuits grew louder, culminating in a climactic showdown that seemed more suited to the movies than a family feud. Lawyers spoke in hushed tones of discovery requests, evidence vaults, and possible depositions. The courthouse, symbolic or actual, was the platform where the fate of the family would be determined, no longer by love, but by law. And every day that went by, the clock ticked around closer, the stakes increased, and the chances of explosive revelations more and more inevitable. With the threat of legal battle around the corner, the family past came flooding back with agonizing vividness. Marriages once so full of promise now replayed like taunting flashbacks in their minds, ceremonies, shared addresses, and vows of eternal togetherness. But these recollections came with shadows, instances of uncertainty, rumors of favoritism, and battles that had been condensed for television, but never resolved in life. The further the family went back into their history, the more apparent it was each crack had a beginning point, and each broken promise had repercussions. Suspicions whirled around Robyn, who had always stood as Kody's strongest supporter. And now, as rumors of financial improprieties and changing allegiances mounted, speculation cast her under a spotlight, no longer as the dutiful wife, but as possible lightning rod for legal and emotional repercussions. Might Robyn hold up to being the target of both the court of law and the court of public opinion? Or would she be the focal point whose choices weighed in on the outcome of the whole drama? As the countdown to possible legal action reached its peak, the tension became charged. Lawyers allegedly traded acerbic letters, insiders whispered of sealed evidence, and the family prepared for the worst, each wondering inwardly how much they would hazard for truth, justice, or vengeance. The Coyote Pass land, once a fantasy, now appeared no more than a stage awaiting capture. But even as the storm brewed, one question loomed over everything. Who would move first when the trial would finally commence? The day of reckoning had finally come. The courtroom was filled not with cameras, but with tension so razor-sharp it could shatter glass. Every family member sat ready, their faces masks of calm barely concealing the storm within. Legal representatives voiced measured words, but the gravity of their meaning was indistinguishable. Accusations of money mishandling, queries regarding who actually owned the land, and murmurs of taped discussions that threatened to destroy the carefully constructed facade of harmony the family had long presented. Just as the hearings appeared to develop a rhythm, an uninvited player entered the mix. This witness, a former insider, allegedly bore not only testimony, but shards of evidence the family hoped had been lost to eternity. Their testimony created a dramatic picture of nighttime bickering, unfiled understandings, and secrets bartered like commodities. But their motives were as inscrutable as the accusations themselves. Were they after justice, vendetta, or fame? While legal teams battled, another surprise appeared: the presence of a secret document, a possible contract or signed affidavit, implying that financial obligations for Coyote Pass were not what had been publicly asserted. If proven authentic, it could redirect not just the ownership of property, but the story of who gave up the most and who could lose everything. The tension in the courtroom became electric as rumors hinted at one wife having given confidential information to the opposing counsel. Either from fear, rage, or survival, this act of betrayal, if it happened, broke the fragile coalition and provided fodder for speculation that the case had irrevocably turned against them. Heads turned within the room, each look rife with suspicion. Trust broken, it now seemed irreparable. And in the background of the silence, Kody's face suggested that he had expected this along. When court resumed, legal teams produced what theorists referred to as the vault of evidence, papers, potential recordings, and financial records long rumored. The drama wasn't so much in what was introduced, but how the family responded. Gasps, unspoken tears, and the uncomfortable understanding that the tale was no longer one of who was in the right, but of who stood to lose the most once the truth was finally disclosed. As the proceedings were nearing their end, tension hung in the air. Some forecast a settlement. Others felt the case would conclude with a stunning verdict, one that could redefine not only the rights to property but reputations. But just as the gavel was about to come down, an abrupt announcement stalled the verdict. One last piece of evidence, chargeable, disputed, and intensely personal, remained to be reviewed. And with it, the whole case was turned back into turmoil. Just as the courtroom fight was poised to end, a bombshell revelation came out, something that questioned the very bedrock of the family's pax. A supposed second document emerged, contrary to previous statements regarding ownership and responsibility, and now potentially indicating that more than one party had been deceived right from the beginning. The courtroom fell silent. Lawyers scrambled. And the family, visibly disturbed, started to question if the battle was no longer about who possessed what, but how far-reaching the deception actually was. With public opinion churning and legal stakes riding high, Robyn was caught in the middle. In a dramatized presentation, she held her ground, voice measured but charged, voicing what appeared to be a desperate appeal, not for property, but to save what little was left of the family's cohesion. Her testimony raised more questions than answers. Was she protecting herself, hiding secrets that, if discovered, would upend everything? In the corridors of justice and beyond, speculation ran wild. Headlines suggested fiery evidence, sealed depositions, and even the prospect of a scandal larger than anyone had envisioned. The family understood that whatever verdict came next wouldn't simply resolve who left with land, money, or pride. It would define their heritage. And with the public's interest at a fever pitch, there was no going back. The courtroom was hushed as the judge readied to hand down the verdict. All eyes were ahead, all breaths were suspended. What started as a domestic squabble had become a high-drama affair, and now the outcome was seconds away. The verdict, dramatized as it was in concept, was not framed as easy triumph or failure. Instead, it was characterized as a heart-wrenching compromise, a decision that left everyone only half satisfied and wondering if it had been worth the struggle. The dust settled, but the emotional destruction remained. Bonds were broken beyond mending. Public opinion fluctuated wildly, painting heroes and villains in equal strokes. And the future of Coyote Pass and the family's heritage hinged in the balance. But in the midst of the mayhem, one thing was more true than any court decision. The family would never remain the same again. Speculation suggested that behind closed doors, new arrangements, new partnerships, and new secrets were already being made. Because in the sphere of high-stakes reality soap opera, there is always another page yet to be written. This family's drama is far from over, so smash like if you're hashtag TeamWives, subscribe for the next explosive update, and drop a comment below. Who do you think will win? Stay shady, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next scandal. Kiss mark behind TLC Sister Wives out.